So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we are going to talk about initial access workflow and ransomware insights. But before starting, I want to say that I'm not going to present anything crazy for initial access like DLL proxying or click once. I'm going to present stuff that is still working in 2025 in order to get access to organizations as a ransomware operator. So a quick disclaimer for this, since I'm going to provide real victims, targets and organizations, you are going to see some pictures with some real victims. Please do not attempt these techniques against real systems or organizations. Only test in lab environments or with explicit authorization. So the first classical slide, who am I? I'm a senior penetration tester at Data Core Systems. I'm a certification addict, as you can see. And you can find me on LinkedIn or Discord if you want. And for, let's say, professional stuff, I am the founder of Disruption Academy, where I try to create red teaming courses and offensive ones. There are 3 in development, so if you want to try them, please join. And here you have the presentation syllabus. We are going to talk about what is ransomware, what is initial access, some common initial access vectors, recon and initial foothold, privilege escalation, and many more. And for each module, we will make correlations with some leaked TTPs from a manual, from Logbit, from Busterlord. So who is this guy and what is a playbook? When this interview was taken, he was 23. Right now, he's in jail, but yeah. He worked for REvil, RansomX, and eventually he was contacted to work for Logbit. His specialty in the Logbit was initial access brokerage through VPN corporate brute force attacks. As you can see here, he was pretty active on dark web forums, selling access to different type of companies. And here on the right side, you can see a picture of the playbook. There are 2 in total. And they were actually sold for a couple of times on dark web for more than $10,000. So they're pretty interesting. So what is ransomware? I think everybody knows is a malicious activity that denies access to systems, organizations, in order to steal sensitive information to get money. And the impact is pretty obvious. Operational downtime and lost business continuity can take from hours to weeks and even months. The direct financial costs are ransomware demands, the incident response team, legal and regulatory fines. And the most important one, in my opinion, is the reputational damage and customer trust erosion, because if you lose your customers, you basically lose the money. Ransomware, it works pretty easy. The model is pretty easy to understand. We have the ransomware as a service affiliates, where we're commercial platform, where developers provide payloads and affiliates operate attacks. We have the operators, which can be independent operators or the operators inside of the ransomware group. And the motivation is pretty obvious. It's a financial gain, ransom payments, insurance payouts, and extortion. And if you want to play with this kind of stuff, to see ransom notes, ERA rules, victim reports, and related research, you can go to Ransomware Live. It's a public repository. It's pretty cute and interesting. And another interesting stuff that you can see here are the ransom chats. Here I picked 2, which are still good, but if you go to this platform and look for ransom chats, you will see people begging that they're going to get fired, they won't have money to feed their families and stuff like that, but don't be like those guys, because attackers don't care. For them, it's like a normal job. They work most of them work from 9 to 5. It's pretty interesting. And an important key point here is that an experienced crisis negotiator or a professional incident response team can often reduce the initial ransom demand by 50% or more. And another quick tip, and a pretty important one, is that when the person from the victim organization gets in contact with the ransomware group, the attacks on the organization should normally cease, because the attackers understand that the organization wants to pay and they no longer want to consume resources and time. A real-life incident that we had, one of my colleagues was able to delay the ransomware payment for like 5 or 6 weeks time, and in this window time, we were able to build the infrastructure, recover the files, the backups, and so on, and they didn't need to pay the ransomware payment anymore. For the initial access is the first foothold an attacker gains in a target environment. It works pretty simple. They do some recon. Eventually, they breach inside of the organization. They put persistence, and then they advertise this initial access on dark web forums or directly sell them to the ransomware group. Here you can see a photo, a guy from, this photo was taken from the forum exploit.is, I think so. I don't remember exactly. He was selling access to a company with a revenue of $1 billion. And it was 3 types of access, so it was pretty good for ransomware operators. And why this matters, why the initial access matters, is because if we stop it early, and it dramatically reduces the attacker's ability to escalate and cause impact. So this is the initial access brokers, but there are 2 types of, let's say, brokers. We have initial access brokers, and we have the initial access providers, which can be even your employees. Lately, attackers try to, let's say, search for vulnerable people inside of your organizations. Maybe some people have some financial problems, some family problems, I don't know. And they go to them and buy the access for your company directly from them. So there are 2 types, and the most important one, I think, is the initial access provider, your employees, so because they get directly access into your organization. Some common initial access vectors, 70% of ransomware attacks start with email phishing. It's still the most common entry point. It remains the top initial access vector, where attackers try to build credential harvesting pages, maybe send some malicious attachments, with malware and stuff like that. We have credential compromise and reuse, where attackers exploit leaked or reused credentials to access cloud services, VPN, internal portals, or even external portals. So for this, the most important thing is to have a hygiene and MFA, because they are the highest return of investment defenses. And we have another one, which is called exposed remote services, like RDP, VPN, SSH, and many more. Here you can see 2 photos. One from Chances, is a pretty known search engine, where I search for RDPs exposed on the internet, which are not on the default port, which is 3389. And as you can see, I got almost 1 million results. And also another thing, if you have a paid account, you'll get more results. And here we have another picture from Shodan, which is another search engine to find vulnerabilities, misconfigured services, and many more, which I found another RDP exposed from a Russian IP, which after a little bit of research, I found that this was actually a honeypot. And now let's talk about how Busterlord actually exploited these exposed remote services. Basically, he grabbed for one known exploit, in this case for 40 VPN. He picked CV 2018, which is an exploit that allows to recover clear text credentials. He went to his favorite Russian online mass scanner. Here you can you can even scan for country ranges, organizations ranges, IP ranges, and many more. And after he got this IP list, he just launched the exploit. Everybody can do this. We just Python 3 exploit.py and the list of the IPs. And as a result, if the instances are vulnerable, we'll see something like this. We have the IP, the port, a UID, I think so, or a hostname, I don't remember exactly, a username and a password. Those are the most important ones, because I think everybody knows how 40 client VPN looks like. We have the IP, the port, the username, and the password, and what remains is to just connect. Like he told us, if the connection is successful, we will see something like this. And another one would be software vulnerabilities and exploits. Those are the most common ones, where unpatched or misconfigured internet-facing software can provide initial access, like external portal, where, for example, we could have an SQL injection, from which an attacker could do some lateral movement, get some credentials, dump the database, and many more. And the favorite one, my favorite one, is supply chain and third-party access, where we have a software company that builds code and updates it on GitHub, and we have a threat actor, which might be a third party or even your employee, pushes some malicious code, and once the code is pushed to the GitHub, that application of that software that is built on, it will get to the customers, and they will eventually get infected. And from here, from Module 4, Recon and Initial Foothold, we will actually start to how to ransomware company 101, because we will go through all the steps that Bastard used in his playbooks. But before that, we are going to talk about OSINT, because it's the first step. So open source intelligence is publicly available information about people, systems, organizations that can reveal stacks, personal roles, email patterns, and expose services. You will ask, okay, why that email pattern is important? I can't tell you how many times I was inside of an Active Directory and the organization had the AD users the same as the email pattern. So it's very important. That's why the attackers use it, because it maps targets, identifies like high value people and systems, and it helps to craft believable social engineering and phishing content. So it's very important. Even this email pattern could help us in order to map the organization and take advantage of it. So what we would normally do, we don't normally do it. We are not ransomware operators, but let's continue the role play. We would get some emails. We could use Phonebook. It's a pretty known tool created by Intelligence. We could grab some emails, then maybe search for some data breaches, compromised emails using IntelliX. It's an enterprise tool, but it's pretty good. And once we have this credentials list, we have the usernames and the passwords, we could go to Showdown, where we can search for server services, vulnerabilities, and many more, and try them. And also there is LeakX. This is my most favorite one, because you can search directly for exposed data, leaked files, vulnerable services, and many more. But do we really need to do this fancy stuff? Well, no, because you don't need to do this stuff when you can just brute your way in. Here you can see a photo taken by Bastard, where he brute forced a lot of organizations and IPs. Again, in this case, it was Cisco, where the sysadmin left test accounts, the username test, and the password or test. This stuff still happens. And here, on the third photo, the translation is not good, because it was taken firstly from Russian, and anyway, he heard someone, an employee from an organization, that they had some 40 instance, and one of his Logbit colleagues told him to Bastard this information, and they actually tried it, and they were successful to log in using WSV and the password 128, and the revenue of that company was $25 billion. So as you can see here, thanks for the money. As a quick story that I found, the company was able to trace them and kick them out of the infrastructure, but still they were able to get in. It's still a thumbs up to them, or not. And some common mistakes that help the hackers. Well, as you saw, publicly exposed VPN endpoints with no or weak access controls, lack of MFA, because, for example, if they would guess the credentials and MFA would have blocked them, reuse of weak or leaked credentials, insufficient logging and alerting on failed logins, poor segmentation. Again, if we have a good segmentation on the network, this would make the attackers pretty mad, because it's going to be harder for them to actually move laterally and go to their scope. And as you can see here on the photo, we earlier saw that exploit on 40 that allows us to get clear text credentials. Well, it's still used in 2025, and it has a lot of hits. Now imagine on the latest exploits how many there are. Privilege escalation and internal recon. Well, what those attackers look for? Domain controllers, databases, password vaults, and locations where credentials token are cached. Accounts with on administrative or backup privileges, service accounts, backup servers, NAS, shares, file shares, document management systems, and also they look on the target machines on desktop folders or documents because, again, I can't tell you how many times sysadmins stored all the passwords on a simple document on desktop. And configuration files, automation scripts, CI/CD, and many more. So how is abusing this Buster Lord? Well, he uses a pretty cool tool called SoftPerfect Scanner. You could use also an Nmap or any network mapper, but he chose to use this one. It's pretty cute. And once he had access to the organization through the VPN, he just scanned the network range. But before doing the scan, he actually set up some settings. As you can see here, he actually put the credentials again, because once you have the credentials, maybe those credentials were used somewhere else, or maybe you can access something more with those credentials. And he looked for common, let's say, management ports, RDP, backup storages like Synology, which stay on 5000, 5001, and many more. And if you have a paid account for this tool, you can actually use modules. In this case, he opted for Eternal Blue. Without going through any technical stuff, Eternal Blue is an exploit. If you use it, you can get basically access to that machine as a local administrator. And he just basically scanned, again, the network, and he found a lot of machines that are vulnerable to this exploit. Basically, he had access as local administrator to each of those machines. Some ports that he is looking for are some general RPC, SMB, web servers, data storages, Vim, databases, remote control like FTP, SSH, WinRM, and many more. And as you can see here, once you use this tool with the Eternal Blue module, if the machine is vulnerable, you will see something like this with a red slash. This means that you have access as local administrator to that machine. Okay, so we found those machines. What we can do is pretty easy: launch Metasploit MSF console, grab the IPs of the machines that are vulnerable, paste them, get the L host of our VPN, and just paste them. And as you can see here, press enter and hope for success. And if it's successful, you will see something like this, where it tells you that a session was created in the background. And once you have a session, you can interact with it and actually execute commands on that machine. And he was interested in whether the computer was in a domain or not, because for him, the target was to get a domain admin inside of the Active Directory. For the people that don't know, a domain admin is basically a god that can control any machine inside of an Active Directory without going into technical details. And we can see this if that machine is inside of its domain joined. We can see it by just typing sysinfo, and it will give us the domain name. Once we have local administrator on that machine, we can just basically dump the hashes of the users, and eventually we would crack them or reuse them in a pass the hash attack. Some other ways to compromise if we are inside of an organization would be if we have access to, one second, is it working? Yeah. If we have access to a domain controller with guest authentication, we could basically brute force all the users by brute forcing the relative identifier, which is an integer that uniquely identifies an account within a domain, and then create a username list with those accounts. And once we have those users, we could do an ASAP roasting attack, which is a Kerberos-focused reconnaissance offline cracking technique that attackers use to extract password-derived data from the accounts, especially the accounts that have the do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. We could get the hashes, crack them, and reuse those accounts inside of the Active Directory. In this case, this was taken from my lab. The password for this user, Nell Robinson, was QWERTY, and you will say that it's not real life, but it is. A lot of users have weak passwords, or the passwords are the organization and the year and a special character. And we have Kerberoasting, which is another technique that allows an attacker to obtain a hash. Again, get the hash, we can crack it and reuse the credentials. Another pretty interesting thing that maybe you might have inside of your organizations are the pre-configured pre-Windows 2000 computers, which once you assign the computer as a pre-Windows 2000 computer, the password basically becomes the machine name with lowercase. For example, we have the machine account WSOld with $, the password would be WSOld. This still happens. And once you try to log in with it, it will give you a status no login workstation trust account. But you can bypass this by changing the password, and you can actually reuse this account again inside of the Active Directory and enumerate further. And also, another thing that you can do is to look for clear stored credentials in the description. Once you have a valid account inside of the Active Directory, you can basically query anything on the domain controller and get the descriptions on every user. And here I have a video. Again, if you have a valid account, and of course you can do some LDAP queries, you can basically do stuff like getting all the objects and try to map it in a graph like Bloodhound. And for the lateral movement and pivoting, why it's pretty important and the definition and the impact. Well, for example, an attacker gains access to a machine, but he doesn't find anything interesting there. Well, it's important because he can actually move to another machine and so on until his objective is achieved. Maybe he found some credentials or anything, some backups with some stored credentials again, and many more. And why this matters? Because if we detect it early, this lateral movement, we can prevent the attacker from to reach critical assets. So it's very important to have a good segmentation of the network, and because we can limit the attacker. So what Besserer did once he had the credentials and dumped the hashes, cracked them, and so on. Here you can see on the first photo, he was able to crack an local administrator account, and he got a password, and he just reused them, and again, he was able to access many more machines. He just rescanned all the targets, and he confirmed the access. Another thing that he did here was to exploit zero logon. Again, without going into technical details, zero logon is a vulnerability where you can bypass the cryptographic checks and reset the deceased computer account to an empty string. And once you have access to this, you can basically dump all the domain. So he just used a simple exploit. Anybody can use it with the hostname of the domain controller and the IP of the domain controller. Those are the requirements in order to use this exploit. You would ask, how can I identify a domain controller? Well, it's pretty easy. All the domain controllers have the 53 port and port 88 Kerberos. So you can go by this, or also from the hostname. Many organizations tend to use the host names, and you will see that if the hostname is DC 2019, maybe it's a domain controller. And he just got these host names, IPs, and launched the exploit. And if the target is vulnerable, the machine account of the domain controller is changing to an empty string. And once this is an empty string, you can just dump all the secrets. This is called a DCSync attack. And we can dump all the hashes and password, all the hashes of the users, and reuse them or crack them. But most often, we use the pass the hash attack in order to reuse the hashes, because maybe some password hashes are not crackable. We can use the hash directly. He used secrets dump here and also SMB exec to connect to the machine, to the domain controller machine. It's a pretty known tool from InPacket. It's a suite of tools. I strongly recommend them. And for cracking, he used crack md.ru. We have an alternative, it's called crackstation.net. Again, if you try to access those Russian tools, it won't work. You need to have an IP from Russia or some type of proxies, I don't know. And this is how it looks from this video view. We changed the domain controller machine account to empty string, and then we launched secrets dump in order to dump all the user's hashes. So what he did after he gained access to the domain controller, it was pretty easy. He just created a new user called support because it's not that obvious. It's a good option. He activated the user, he added them to the local group administrators, and then he added this newly created user to the domain admins group. This is a pretty red flag because normally you wouldn't see this process. I mean, it's pretty sus if you see something like this. So this is a good alert to know that something bad is going on. And for the AV bypass, you would ask how this guy downloaded the tools and was able to move laterally and stuff like this. Well, he had access as local administrator from the start because the machines were vulnerable, and he just connected to them. And you can either disable the Windows Defender, but it's pretty obvious. Let's say more fine option would be to add an exclusion folder, and there you could dump all your tools and use them. Those are some ports, again, that they target, mostly Logbit. We have the ports, again, that I told you earlier. We have Synology, data storages, backups, Veritas backups, Oracle remote control. Those are the most important ones because they want to have more accesses to the machines or domain. And here on the middle, you have another picture. OK, we enumerated the network, the AD, Active Directory. And we, as a ransomware operator, we want to compromise the backups so the victim couldn't restore them. Well, in 40% of the cases, domain admin credentials are working. So you could connect to, let's say, a Synology with the domain admin credentials. And here, I don't think you can see this organization that he attacked. They had almost 1 petabyte of backups. So yeah, it was pretty bad. For the ransomware deployment, if you want to play some ransomware, maybe analyze it, or I don't know, do your stuff, you have VX Underground, which is a pretty known platform for this. You have a section called Builders, where you can get mostly of all the malwares and ransomwares, most of them, and you can download them and use them. But I strongly recommend to do this in a lab environment. For example, here we have the Logbit3 builder. As you can see, it's pretty easy to understand. We have a config, and there most of the configs are done. For example, the nodes, whitelisting some folders, maybe kill some processes. You can do anything inside of this config, then build it and use it. Here we have an example for 88 Riot. It's a remote access Trojan. Again, you can download it from VX Underground and play with it. And here we have an example for Babuk, which is another ransomware builder. Again, it's pretty easy to use. We can just build it, and it will give us the encryptor and the decryptor. As you can see here, I used the encryptor. All the extensions were converted to Babik. This is the ransom extension for this ransomware group. And then I decrypted them as easier as encrypting them to normal state. And for the Module 8 detection and monitoring playbook, we all should have some core telemetry sources. For example, AAD and LDAP logs. Those are the most important ones because once the attacker is inside of your organization, they would 99% of the time they will do some LDAP queries, for example, to dump the users, maybe use some Bloodhound, some known tools, compiled tools. We should have some endpoint protections to look for process creation, command line arguments, script interpreters, lateral movement tools, file encryption activity, also network and firewall for email and web gateways to look for phishing payloads, URL redirections, attachments. And for the backups, we should look for snapshot deletions, file changes, or access from outside of the business hours. And I think this is the most important thing for the blue teaming. We should look for behavioral approaches, not to detect the tool, but to focus on how the adversaries operate. Because, okay, the tool can be obfuscated, I don't know, do anything, and it will bypass the antivirus, EDR, and so on. But if we actually detect how the adversaries operate, it will be easier. It will be easier for us, and also we would catch them faster. So we could look for unusual process chains, rapid file modifications. That means, okay, there might be some ransomware running, authentication from new hosts, enumeration of shares, users, disabling security tools like Busterlord, disable the Windows Defender, creation of new local admins, where he created a new local admin and then added him to the domain groups. This doesn't normally happen. And the access to backups or shadow copies, how he managed to get access to the Synology data storage and compromise it. And a quick playbook for ransomware detection would be, we have detection triage and triage, where we validate the alert, assess the scope, and prioritize based on asset criticality. We have containment, which is very important. We have to isolate the compromised systems, disable defective accounts, revoke active sessions. And another thing here is don't stop your storage or the machine that is ransomware, because if the organization eventually wants to pay it, they will find out that the recovery files are corrupted. They can no longer get back to their original state. So just, let's say, isolate them from the network. That's more than enough, of course, if you plan to pay the ransomware. For the investigation, to collect volatile evidence, log data, memory snapshots, and everything for the digital forensics. Eradication, if we can, to remove malicious artifacts, reset credentials, and patch exploit vulnerabilities. And eventually recovery, to restore clean backups if we can, verify system integrity, and monitor for re-entry attempts. And then we have the post-incident review. This is the most fun one. Analyze root cause, update detection rules, and enhance response processes. Thank you. That was all.
All right. Thank you so much, Iulian. We have time for a few questions from the audience. So yes, we have one right here in front. Mike is coming.
First off, congratulations. The presentation was really nice.
Thank you.
Now, one thing that I'd like to ask, ransomware now comes not only with data encryption, but also data exfiltration. We can protect against data encryption with backups, but how can we effectively protect against data exfiltration? Maybe stop it from even reaching their servers.
Well, this is pretty hard. For example, currently I'm doing a red teaming assessment, and basically if someone really wants to exfiltrate data, it's pretty hard for the organization to actually stop it. Because, for example, I could take my phone and take a picture, or maybe encode it in some sort, let's say, base64, and then transfer it to some known valid platforms like DontPad, where you can go and actually type live and exfiltrate data, or even known web transfers like WeTransfer, you could upload it. So it's pretty hard to actually stop the exfiltration. Though there are some methods. For example, if you could have a browser with data loss protection or something like that. I don't really know all the tools, but at the end, it's pretty hard to actually stop it completely. It's pretty hard. So yeah, we should focus on monitoring the traffic. This could also help us. For example, if we see that an employee downloads 100 gigs at night or actually exfiltrates it, it's a pretty red flag, and we should investigate it. So we shouldn't wait for them to exfiltrate. We should be proactive and search for this. This is the best method to stop this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take another question, if you have any. Yep, right there in the middle. keep a hand up. Oh, yeah, we'll take this one first, and then we'll go to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for thanks for your talking. Okay. Will ransomware works on post-quantum encryption?
Post-quantum encryption for what? For, let's say, backups or on what encryption post?
Okay, backups, for example.
What?
Backups.
For backups?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, if an attacker would have some this type of computer, some post-computer, quantum computer, I don't think they would target a normal company or something. And also, if they would have access to this type of technology, again, basically it depends on the password, but they could eventually start brute force it. But again, this type of ransomware groups like Logbit, even Logbit or any other, Akira or any, they wouldn't have access to this type. So the groups that would have access would be APTs, and I don't think they would go to backups and stuff like that because they would stay into your infrastructure and sniff credentials, sensitive documents because they are motivated geopolitical and they wouldn't go for backups or backups like more for information, secrets and stuff like that. I mean, I think it's also pretty early to assume that somebody would have access to this type of technology, but it's still a threat. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We had, keep your hand up, yep, in the middle, and then we'll go to the gentleman in gray.
Hello. I wanted to ask how some people can delay the payment of ransomware with like 6 weeks. Like, what is the methodology they use? What words or?
One more time, please. I didn't.
How can some people delay the payment of a ransomware with 6 weeks or something like this big margin over time, 6 weeks or a month and a half? What they use, what words or channels to make the hackers accept the delay?
How you can delay it? So how you can delay a ransomware payment?
Yes.
Okay, so as I told you earlier, every ransomware group have chat where when you get in contact with them, they typically stop because, again, they lose time and resources because they assume that the target organization wants to pay, so they don't want to attack the organizations anymore because also, even if they are attackers, they also have some trust between, let's say, me as a victim and they as a group, because if they continue to attack, I will spread the word because they didn't keep their word, they attacked me, they compromised me again. So it's also some kind of trust here. But once you get access to that chat and get in contact with them, the attack should normally cease and it's going to be okay. They wouldn't attack you anymore if you get in contact with them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then we had the gentleman in gray, if you can raise a hand. Yep.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Regarding the exfiltration, I want to ask if a company has, let's say they are implementing sensitivity labels with encryption for very confidential files, or they have data loss prevention policies. Will this help, in preventing exfiltration, and how much will help in this type of scenarios? Thank you.
Yeah, it helps. Again, I said that at the end it wouldn't matter, but some softwares, and if you, for example, you have a document that is strictly confidential and you mark it as strictly confidential, normally you couldn't paste it or upload it anywhere, but there are ways in order to do this. For example, a pretty known way, I don't want to tell the solution name, but if you went to PowerShell and encode that specific, let's say, PDF to base64, you could get the base64 and decode it on your machine and get the document. But normally on, let's say, enterprise high-end solutions, this wouldn't work. But again, there are some type of bypasses that you can use. That's why I said at the end, if a really good attacker knows what they're doing, they will get that file. So that's why we need to be proactive and stop them before doing any type of exfil.
All right, thank you, Iulian. And another question up here in front. The mic is coming. Yep, if you can keep your hand up.
Work? Okay, thank you. My question is, what is the best strategy to limit the lateral movement in the network?
Well, there are a lot. For example, if we have a good network segmentation, of course, this wouldn't stop it, but it will be harder for the attacker. We could monitor again. The monitoring part is the most important one because, for example, once the attacker have access to the Active Directory, because most of the organizations use Active Directory on-prem or even hybrid, the attackers, in order to fully compromise the domain, they would use LDAP queries, which you can see, and of course, you will get alerted that they are doing some lateral movement, or if you see an origin IP connecting very fast to a lot of IPs, or even probe them, there are a lot of ways to check for this. Of course, if you don't have the security controls in place, they will be able to move laterally, but again, this can be seen pretty easy if you have everything put in place correctly. Monitoring on LDAP, monitoring that you see. Normally, your employees wouldn't, let's say, connect to the domain controller normally or daily or something like this. Again, IPs connecting to another machines from different origins and places, because attackers tend to password spray and reuse credentials. There are a lot of ways to detect this and to stop this. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions? I see a hand raised all the way in the back. Yes, if you can wave. Yes, okay.
At the time of the attack, any of the...
Can you speak a little bit louder?
Yeah. At the time of the attack, any of the target machines had any protections?
I didn't hear it, sorry.
At the time of the attack,
Okay.
any of the target machines had any protections on them?
If the target machines have any protections on them?
Yeah.
Again, it depends. In this case, the organization had just Windows Defender. And in this case, the attacker was able to get local administrator directly once he had access to the VPN, because the machines were vulnerable to Eternal Blue. Exploiting this, he got local administrator, and once connected to RDP, or it doesn't matter, he was able to disable it. Normally, let's say, normal organization would just have Windows Defender. I mean, it depends, but yeah, normally it should have some, let's say, protection on it. Windows Defender, any would be good, but in the idea, if that machine is not vulnerable, so he could connect it to local administrator and disable it. But for a normal organization, they should use some kind of endpoint protection because they are the best.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iulian.
Thank you.